Either way, they've been married for many years. They travel. They eventually, when Avraham is 75, Hashem tells him to go to Eretz Canaan, go to the lands that I will show you. That's when he goes to Israel to settle there. And they don't have children throughout their marriage. Now, at that time, people had slightly longer lifespans, but still, it was they were not they weren't expecting to have children really afterwards. They were too old for it. But Hashem blesses them a number of times that they will have children. Now, this doesn't happen originally, and therefore, Sarah says to Avraham, I can't have children, so why don't you have children with Hagar? And this was something acceptable at the time. Sarai, I'll read it inside. Vatamer Sarai says, El Avram to Avram, Hine na'atzrani Hashem miledet. Hashem has stopped me, restrained me from being able to give birth. Baina el shivchasi. Please come to my handmaid. Ulai yibanim mimena. Perhaps I will be built up from her. So I'm not going to have children, but maybe my handmaid Hagar will. Vayishma Avram lekol Sarai. So Avram listens to Sarai's voice. Now, if you think this was easy for Avram, it was very hard. Of course, for Sarai, very hard. Bringing someone else into their relationship. And for Avram too, and Avram did not want to do it, and he never entertained the thought. It was ludicrous. Hagar was a lot younger than him, and anyway, Avram had this deep connection with Sarah. He didn't want to do it, but okay, Sarah says this way there'll be children. Continuation, okay. So this is something that Sarah is the one driving. Hagar didn't think of it. Avram didn't think of it. Sarai drives this. Then she has a change of heart. It doesn't quite go as she expected. There becomes this tension between Hagar and Sarah, and then Sarai. This is the next verse that I've quoted. Vatanea Sarai. Sarai afflicts her. And she fled from before her. So Hagar runs away. Okay, so now Hagar's left. Then a malach, an angel, comes and tells Hagar, go back. This is your destiny. Go back. You'll have a child with Avraham and he will become a great nation. Go back. And she does so. And then when she goes back, she indeed becomes pregnant. That's what the next verse says. It says that I quote, "Vateled Hagar lavram ben," that Hagar gave birth to a son. Vayikra Avram shem benoya shel yalda Hagar. Avram names this son that Hagar gives birth to. He names that son Yishmael. Okay. This is the first part of the story. Now, the story then continues and becomes more complicated when Sarah has children. When Sarah has children, it becomes more complicated because a child, because now Sarah is worried about the influence that Yishmael might have. So this is now in Vayeira, in our Parsha. It says that Sarah, this is in verse 2, Pasuk base. I'll just read it in English. And Sarah conceived and bore a son to Avram in his old age at the time of which God had spoken to him. So Hashem had said, you'll have a son in a year. And that's exactly what happens. And then they call the son Yitzchak. Now we've got two children here. Now, you would have thought perhaps, you could think both ways, but this child does not improve the relationship between Hagar and Sarah. Actually, what happens is that the relationship is only downhill from here. And I'll just skip that. I've got a comment of Rashi there. I'll just skip it for a moment. And the next pasuk says, this is 10. Vataymer Avram. Sarah says to Avram, Garish Amazos Vespana, expel this maid, Vespana and a son, Kiloyer Ben Amazos in Beniam Yitzchak, because I will not have this child, the son of the maid, Yishmael, inherits with my son Yitzchak. Avram finds this very hard. How can I expel my son? And Hagar, my second wife. And Hashem says, no, this is what you should do. Sarah is correct. Now, I want to ask you a few questions. Number one, who's the one who encourages the marriage originally? It's Sarah. And now, once Hagar gets married, Sarah is tough on her, makes it difficult for her, makes her run away. Then after she has Yishmael, expels her. That's number one. She's the one who wanted Hagar, and now she's expelling her. Number two, what about Yishmael? Avram had waited 86 years for a son. Finally, Yishmael is born. And what does Sarah do? Sarah says, get him out of here. Expel him. Imagine what Avram was going through at that time. Expel my son after 86 years. There must be more to this story. Next, another question. Later on, and we'll read this in a moment, Sarah passes away. Okay? Sarah passes away, and of course, this is very difficult for Avraham. We read, and maybe I'll go back to read the text inside, about how Avram took his wife Sarah's passing very hard. But then what does he do later? He marries Keturah. He marries another woman called Keturah. And according to Rashi, Keturah was another name for Hagar. So he marries the woman that Sarah says, get her out of here. Once Sarah passes away, what does Avram do? Remarries her. Now I know of a case where there was someone who was, had a girlfriend, and he was thinking he wanted to marry her, and his parents were very against the wedding. His mother was very against the wedding, and he didn't want to sort of pain his elderly mother, and he didn't marry her. They stayed boyfriend girlfriend. They didn't get married. Then his mother passed away, and what happened next? He married her, right? So I know of a situation like that, but now we have something else happening. Sarah tells Avram, get rid of Hagar, send her away, send away Hagar, send away Yishmael. Then Sarah passes away. What does Avram do? He remarries Hagar, according to Rashi. This is again very strange. It seems almost like, okay, good. Now Sarah's finished. Now I can do what I want to do. I can bring back Hagar. Now, then what happens is even more strange. Avraham has more children. Avraham has more children with Keturah, who according to Rashi, as we said, is Hagar. And what does he do with those children? He sends them away. He tells them, he says here, he gives them some presents, and then he tells them, bye-bye, don't see you later, right? It's very strange. He has more children, and then he sends them away. What's going on? And more importantly, in terms of us, what is the message? Let me read this a little bit more of the story inside, and then we'll get to some of the messages. Okay, let's start from chapter 23, Sarah's passing. Vatama Sarah passes away, but Kiryas Arba, in Kiryas Arba, he Chevron, which is Chevron. By the way, nowadays, right outside of Hebron, there's a Jewish settlement called Kiryat Arba. And that's because in biblical times, in the times of Avraham at least, Hebron had two names, Kiryat Arba and Hebron. So Sarah passes away, and Vayavei Avraham, and Avram came lisped Sarah to eulogize Sarah, V'livkaisa, and to bewail her. He's very sad. And there's a whole negotiation for the gravesite. He wants to buy her a very prominent place of burial. And that happens. That story concludes. The burial concludes. What happens next? Not right away, but in chapter 23, we have Avram getting remarried. I'll read it in English. And Avram took another wife, and her name was Keturah. As we said, according to Rashi, Keturah was Hagar. And then they have a whole lot of children, and she bore him Zimran and Yakshan, Medan, Midian, Yishbak, Shuach, and Yakshan begot Sheva and Dedan, and the sons of Dedan were Ashurim, Latushim, Laumim. There's all these nations that come out of Avram's marriage in his old age. But then what Avram does is very surprising. And Avram gave all that he possessed to Yitzchak. Okay, he during his lifetime, he already gives away everything to one of his children, Yitzchak. And to the sons of Avram's concubines, Avram gave gifts, and he sent them away from his son Yitzchak while Avraham was still alive, eastward to the land of the east. So what does he say? Goodbye. So we need to understand what's going on here as well. Furthermore, one more, couple more questions on this whole story. Number one, when Sarah wants Avram to expel Yishmael, what does she talk about? Does she say, Yishmael's going to be a bad influence? That I could understand. The Torah hints already that Yishmael was a bad influence, but that's not what she says. You know what she says? If you look back in the verse, which discusses, the pasuk that discusses her when she's actually speaking and saying, we've got to get rid of Yishmael, you know what she says? I've got it in bold there. I don't want Yishmael to inherit together with Yitzchak. So what's going on? Is this a fight over inheritance, or is this caring for Yitzchak's education? Very surprising. Who cares about the inheritance in the long scheme of things, right? It's about gaining the messages, the values of Avraham. She wants her son Yitzchak to be the spiritual continuation of Avram. That I can understand. But why is she talking about the inheritance? The inheritance of Avram is the Jewish. So that's one question. Another one is that when Avram is blessed, Hashem tells him, I want to bless you. You and Sarah are going to have a child together. You know what Avram says? I already have Yishmael. Yishmael's good enough. I don't need more blessings. He almost says, Lo Yishmael yichya lefanecha. Let Yishmael live before you. Why is he so nonchalant about getting a blessing of a child with his dear wife Sarah? So now, I'm going to share a passage from the Gemara in Bava Basra, which is fascinating and surprising. Of course, when the Talmud speaks about, with especially the Agadata section, the stories, and many of the stories are quite, fantastical, but they always have deep messages. The Gemara says, let's try to find the meaning of this one. The Gemara says that if you look in the text sheet, this is right after the end of the Psukim. Rabbi Bana was marking burial caves for the purpose of helping to prevent the contracting of ritual impurity, right? Rabbi Bana was a sage in the time of the Talmud, and he would go, one of the things he would do, one of his hobbies was putting up markers over graves, okay? A lot of people passed away or were killed. It was dangerous times, and many of them there was no marker, or maybe people had passed away a long time ago and the marker had already fallen into disrepair, disappeared, and he would go around marking graves. Why did he do that? And this is, by the way, one of the halachic reasons for having a grave altogether. One of the reasons is so that Kohanim should know where they can't walk. And not just especially Kohanim, but it could be also of general relevance to people to know where they will contract ritual impurity. So he knows, of course, that Hebron is where our forefathers and our patriarchs and matriarchs are buried. He goes there too. And when he arrived at the cave of Avraham, i.e. the cave of Machpelah, he encounters Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, who was standing before the entrance. Okay? So, of course, during their life, Eliezer had faithfully served Avraham. And this continues in some way. The soul of Eliezer is still standing before the soul of Avraham. And Rabbi Bana said to him, what is Avram doing at this moment? So Eliezer said to him, he is lying in the arms of Sarah, and she is examining his head. Okay? What on earth? What's going on here? What does it mean? Like, what are we meant to take from this story? Avram is lying in Sarah's arms and she's looking in his hair. And what's she looking for? What's she examining about his hair? The Rashba says something even more fascinating. The Rashba says, my daughter was just going through the rules for camp. She's, hopefully they'll, with the overnight camp. And they check all the girls for lice before they come. What was Sarah doing? Rashba says, checking Avram's head for lice. Okay? So here they are. They're, you would have thought, I don't know, what would the souls be doing? Basking in the glory of Hashem's presence, which is the divine reward in the world to come. Maybe they're holding a deep and meaningful spiritual conversations. What are the souls doing? Sarah is checking Avram's head for lice. What on earth? And what does it mean? Any thoughts from? Please share. What does it mean that Sarah is checking Avram's head for lice? Well, people are, I guess lice, worms, they're around when people pass away.
Choosing future generations, maybe?
The future generations. So what does the lice represent?
Oh, maybe
something in future generations?
They're alive. Yeah, no.
No, but what you're saying is good. Something about future generations.
Maybe because there's so many lives in the world, like the Jews. No, that's not. Like the stars.
Oh, the stars in the sand.
Could it be weeding out of the negative influences?
Oh, very nice.
People?
Yeah, I like that.
Just an idea.
That's great. And we'll go with something like that, but perhaps with try to have some more detail, develop that thought.
Maybe trying to get rid of wrong thoughts from his head,
Uh-huh.
to expel
Okay,
the
yeah.
wrong thoughts.
Wrong perspectives, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's more on this too, but let's now try to explain everything. Okay. By the way, just to tell you before we go launch this explanation, this piece of Talmud is used also to for another area of halacha, which is Rabbi Bana is standing outside the grave. He asks Eliezer what they're doing. And then when Eliezer says that, Avram's lying in Sarah's arms or in Sarah's lap, so Rabbi Bana says, can you go in and tell them, because I don't want to intrude on them when they're sort of in this intimate state. And actually, some poskim, some halachic decisors, imply from this story that the story is also saying that just a sort of a practical point, that even when people are married, when people are married, it doesn't mean that they have to display, sort of over like certain levels of intimacy and certain types of sort of loving touch or more should only be in private. That's one thing we learn. The other thing we learn is when you have a couple sort of alone, you shouldn't just barge in on them. So that's some practical things. But let's get back to our story. We have always wanted to be a light to the nations. Our prophet spoke of that, and that's something we've always wanted to be. Avraham's name is about him being a father of nations. Avram's name is Avraham, which is an acronym for Av Hamon Goyim, the father of a multitude of nations. So we've always been about that. And Avram cared deeply about inspiring the world and giving the world an understanding and a belief in monotheism, in morals and higher values. That was always Abraham's focus. What about Sarah? Notice that, for example, the recent peace agreement between Israel and United Arab Emirates, Bahrain. So they were called the Abraham Accord, right? Why weren't they called the Sarah Accord? Because, right, of course, Sarah is specific to the Jewish people. Abraham is considered the father of many nations. Sarah, the mother of Yitzchak, and she was always focused specifically on Yitzchak. Yes, Sarah led classes and seminars to inspire the women of her generation towards monotheism and higher values. But her main concern, once she had Yitzchak, from then on, her concern was primarily about Yitzchak's education and Yitzchak's upbringing. She said, it's very nice what I can do for the world, but right now I'm going to be focusing on developing a sort of unique family or people, and that will be my main focus. And this would have brought perhaps some tension, if we can say that, or some difference of perspective between them. Avraham always wanted to go out and influence the world. Actually, when he had before having his Brit, he was worried that having a Brit is going to separate him from the world. He went to consult with a friend, Mamre, and Mamre says, doesn't matter, have the Brit anyway. Why did Avram not do it right away? Because he was worried maybe having the Brit will separate him, will make him not able to positively influence the world. And that's why he asked an opinion. Mamre said, no, do it anyway. And that's what he did. So Avram was always concerned about this. And indeed, when he had a Brit, and then a year later, Yitzchak was born, he lost influence. He became less influential on the world stage. The Rambam talks about him writing books and giving big speeches and influencing thousands, tens of thousands, but that was all in his earlier life. Once he had the Brit and then Yitzchak was born, he became, oh yeah, you remember him, or if we talk about him, he's like, I don't know, if we talk about Bob Hawke, he's not contemporary politics, right? Or Jimmy Carter. So Avram then became sort of this old story with less influence. So Sarah is all about the particularistic covenants and commandments. And this is why this explains the whole story. Sarah is happy to have Hagar, but only if it's not going to affect what is the main thing and what is the side thing. As soon as it starts to become complicated, she says, we've got to stop this. And that's why she gives Hagar a hard time. Hagar runs away. Then Hagar comes back, has the child, Yishmael. Okay, that's fine. But if Yishmael is a bad influence on Yitzchak, get him out of here. And when Sarah said, what does this have to do with inheritance? Because Sarah says, I don't want to divide Abraham's inheritance. In other words, what is Avraham about? Where will Avraham's spiritual energy go? Will it be divided and diluted throughout the whole world? Or will his descendants have something in particular from their ancestors? So Sarah says, I don't want there to be fights over the inheritance. Everyone can take, but what I want also, and I don't want to compromise on this, is that Yitzchak should be the continuation of Avraham. Everyone will gain and everyone will be inspired. The Rambam says that actually, the Rambam notes that something quite amazing happened, right? There were hundreds of small tribes throughout the world, let's say, 2,500 years ago. Why should you think that from all these nations, we're going to have the majority of the world, more than 50% of world population, have their religions based on one of these tribes, so to speak, one group? We've got the Jewish people, and then Christianity and Islam both branch out from Judaism. So it's something very surprising. And the Rambam says that this is a sort of, something special, that the Torah has influenced most of the world and spread everywhere. Everyone knows about the Torah. Everyone knows about concepts in the Torah, like charity and like the right of the individual, like everyone's created in God's image. Everyone knows about history moving towards a destination. Everyone knows about the idea of Mashiach. So there's all these Torah concepts that have spread everywhere, and that's what Avraham would have wanted. And Sarah says, I want that too, but as long as it won't harm Yitzchak. That's why Avraham marries Keturah again afterwards. There's two opinions who Keturah was. Either it was Hagar again, because Avram says, what's the best way to influence the world? If you are their father, right? Avram thought, how I influence the world, I'll have a lot of children, they'll marry different people. Eventually, most of the world will be my descendants. What better way to have influence than that, right? But with a proviso that there's going to be a clear demarcation. They have to know, out of honor to Sarah, now that Hashem said that you've got to respect Sarah's view, that your main contribution will be Yitzchak. So therefore, Avram gives them presents and sends them away during his lifetime, so that it's clear that Yitzchak is the continuation of Avram. That's why he sends them away. By the way, there's another school of thought that Keturah was not Hagar, and she was actually, according to that, from the descendants of Yefet. So Avraham has then three wives. According to this view, he not at the same time, but Keturah later on. But he has first Sarah, who's a Semite from Shem, then Hagar, who is Egyptian, right, from Cham. And then Keturah, who would have been from southern Europe. So now his sort of spread throughout the whole world. He's had an influence over the whole world, and that's exactly what he wanted. Yefet, yeah. Okay, so now this is what it means when we talk about the story with Sarah pulling out lice from Avram's hair. What is lice about? Lice is a living thing which it's a separate being, and then it feeds off other life, right? What if someone has lice in their hair? What does that mean? They're alive, but then the lice are sucking out his blood. That's what lice is. So it's a foreign body that is taking out the energy and the power of this person or this being, this animal, whatever it is. And Sarah's saying, Avraham, you care for everywhere. You've got such a big circle of care that you're gonna, it's like they say, if you're too open-minded, your brains might fall out. So like you're so focused on everywhere, you've got to focus on something specific. They say, when I was young, I thought I could change the world. Then I got a bit older and I said, no, just my city. Then I got a bit older, just my family. And then when I got older, I said, actually, the only one I can really change is myself. So she says, it's lovely, Avraham, and I love you for it. One of the things Sarah says I love about you, Avraham, is that you want to change the world, but you don't necessarily realize there's a lot of lice here. They're eating away at you, they're taking away your energy, but they're not really taking in your ideas. What you've got to try to do is not have a superficial influence on many people, but have a deep influence on few people. That was what Sarah was saying. And therefore focus on Yitzhak rather than the whole world. Now, and that was the meaning of the lice. Okay. So I think with this, we've answered all our questions. And what we've got really more generally is that, yes, we've got to care for everyone. And yes, we should be at the forefront of all good causes. But that can't be all that Judaism is. And on the contrary, we've got some specific mitzvah, we've got some specific mission. So in other words, general causes, we are part of it together with the entire world. The whole world can be part of it too. But we can't forget about there are other causes that are specific to us, and we can't forget about them because that's actually only for us. So there are, many ways to improve the world, and we've got to try for that, but not say, I have fulfilled my duty of sort of being Jewish because I'm environmentally friendly and I fight for the rights of the underdog. Those are Jewish things, but that's not good enough. We've also got specific mitzvah. We've got Torah mitzvah that are specifically for us. And that was what Sarah was saying, that we can't forget about Yitzchak, meaning the particular within the sea of the general and the universalist. Anyways, I don't relate it back to specific policies because we could have both. But what I do say is, and that we're throughout the diaspora, especially, we're losing Jews because they're good people, but they're focused universalist. We're forgetting the particular. And if we can bring one Jew a little bit more involved in the particular as well, then they'll have, as they are already, not only a good influence and good impact, but they'll also stay with them and with future generations also a Jewish impact. Anyway, thank you for your attention, and but I'd like to hear from you. Any comments, questions?
Very interesting. I'm learning a good deal. Thank you. Thank you, Dovid.
Thank you. Thanks, Audrey. Yes.
That's great. Thank you. Great. Very interesting perspectives. And yeah, as always, really enjoyable.
Thank you, Anissa. Anyways. Hi, David. You're on.
Hi,
David
perhaps one
Leib.
of the reasons why
Sorry, Hannah, just one second.
Oh, yeah.
So David and then
Um,
Hannah.
Go on, David.
Avraham has to be told to listen to his wife.
So I'm not hearing you clearly.
Sorry, the previous occasion that we have in the Torah of a man listening to his wife is Adam listening to Chava. That didn't end too well. So perhaps that's why Avraham needs some convincing to listen to Sarah.
Okay.
What's also interesting is that this will replay itself in 2 weeks' time, when Rivka is focused specifically on Yaakov, on Yaakov, whereas Yitzchak is trying to get Esav to stay in the fold as well.
Right. Yes. Interesting. Yeah. And
So there's a female mother's role specifically of the Yahadut, which is
right.
what determines, of course, whether we're Jewish or not.
Right. Comes from the
It's
mother.
the mother role.
Right. We even
Exactly.
find that later on with Yaakov, where Lavan chases him and says, "You stole my trafim." However we translate it, my idols, the things he did magic with. And according to Judaism, you shouldn't be using trafim, this idolatrous practice. Rachel had taken them because she didn't want her father to be, serving idols. And Yaakov says, "No, God forbid, we didn't take it. And, I curse whoever took it." So again, Yaakov is sort of more this wider circle, but because of that, the values are quite weak to include the trafim in that sense. Whereas Rachel is sort of, this is the way it is and that's it.
Yeah, interestingly, Ramban says that Rachel actually wanted to use them.
Okay, that's another interpretation. It's not Pshutei Shel Mikra.
Another interesting idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
so interestingly, I heard on that one that what a trafim. Obviously, Rachel wouldn't have wanted to use trafim if they were really gods. Heaven forbid, it wasn't Avodah Zarah. It was those things which people have in their house, which are not fully treif, but they're not necessarily the best things to have in your house.
Right.
And what was being learned from this is that even the so-called the best Beit Yaakov girl could sometimes be tempted to have things in her home that shouldn't quite be there.
Yeah, well, a lot of people actually, even now, you could buy
They all
things
have
in
to be
like
careful.
India or whatever, which are actually idols, and you buy them, you think of them as nice decoration and bring them home, and actually, yeah. Anyways.
There are all kinds of things which people call idols. People would call celebrities idols.
Oh yeah, I
and
mean
worship them,
literally,
in
like
inverted
things
commas.
that in Asia they might be served as idols, and then we buy them. People could buy them as decoration or whatever.
No, that's also true.
Yeah. Anyway, Hannah
Right.
wanted to say something.
I just wanted to ask you the story you told us about Avraham being in the tent with Sarah and Sarah's looking through his hair.
Yeah.
Where is that from? Is that a midrash or
That's from
something? 'Cause I've never
Gemara.
heard that one.
It's in the Gemara Bava Basra,
Yeah.
page 58. You can
Oh, okay.
you look on Hamayan
believe you.
WhatsApp. I sent the text. You have it there.
Not in front of me because I'm
Yeah, no
seeing you
worries.
on
But
the phone.
it's Bava Basra 50 at page 58.
Right. It's incredible. You learn something new every day.
Yeah.
I'd never heard this one before.
I know it's so strange that it should be more famous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rabbi, I just
Yeah.
wanted to ask a question. Are there any other midrashim on the children that Avraham sent to the east.
Oh yeah, what does it mean? Where?
'cause-
Yeah, like some associate the east with the near, like with east, but near Israel. Others talk about it more as Far East and like somewhere around like India, and that the spiritual traditions there may be part of the presence which Avram gave them before he sent them away.
Right, that's what I've heard. Yes, that the practices in a place like India, that there's speculation that
Right.
it comes from that. Wow.
But simply like one of the sons was Midian. Midian was a nation close to Eretz Yisrael. So
Right.
we know certainly where some of these nations were, and at least originally they were close by. Although, for example, Edom, it was originally like in the Negev area, and then later we associate Edom with Rome, which is another story maybe I'll speak about one time. I've spoken a bit before.
Mhm.
Smiling because I see Nechama. Hi.
I came to say hi. Hi. I heard such beautiful voices. Down.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you very much.
You're
Yishar
welcome.
koach.
Okay, good night to
Another
everyone.
good one.
Those
Thank
that we
Okay.
see and those that we hear and those that we don't see.
Oh, thank you again.
Okay.